And from my point of view, self-compassion is really just compassion turned inward. And so I thought, okay, well, what goes into compassion? So I realized there were 3 elements that needed to be there to have a compassionate mind state. The first is actually mindfulness, right? So I learned it while learning mindfulness. In other words, we have to be willing to be aware of and be present with our pain in order to give ourselves compassion, right? If we like just put it under, put our heads under the rug, nope, it's no problem here, right? We can't be compassionate if we don't acknowledge what's going on. At the same time, if we're like lost in our pain so that we have no perspective, we can't step outside of ourselves to say, hey, you're having a really hard time. How can I help? Right? So we need mindfulness. And then we need kindness, warmth, this idea that we want to help ourselves in some way, which is part of compassion. And then finally, we need a sense of other people, right? So compassion, the term come with, to suffer with, it kind of means it's, we approach our suffering realizing that this is part of the human condition. It's not just me, there's nothing wrong with me for failing or for struggling. This is what it means to be human. And that really differentiates compassion from pity. So that's where I came up with my 3-component model of self-compassion: mindfulness, self-kindness, and common humanity.
And it really maps on to mental health in terms of the research that you've done over the past few decades, that having this type of self-compassion has a lot of benefits to folks. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the research. So I created a scale to measure self-compassion, but research doesn't just use the scale now. A lot of it does, but we also, we teach people self-compassion through interventions, or sometimes we just put people in a self-compassionate frame of mind and see how that changes their mood, for instance. And there's almost approaching 4,000 studies now, and published, and also like dissertations on the benefits of self-compassion. And it's just overwhelming in terms of what it shows, the benefits for mental health. So people who are more self-compassionate, they're less depressed, they're less anxious, they feel less shame, they feel less stress, they're less likely to have things like eating disorders, less likely to contemplate suicide, less likely to ruminate, to procrastinate. So all these kind of maladaptive ways of being with ourselves, if you're self-compassionate, it reduces these maladaptive ways of being. But this is the interesting thing. Even though self-compassion is aimed at suffering, right? It's kind of like how we relate to difficulty. It also yields really positive outcomes like happiness, life satisfaction, hope, optimism, the ability to appreciate our lives, to appreciate our bodies, to notice the good things in life. It leads to better relationships, for instance. So it kind of is equally associated with less negative outcomes and more positive outcomes. And that's because if you think about it, again, self-compassion is a way of dealing with pain and difficulty. And usually it's the pain and difficulty that derails us. So the more we can use self-compassion as a way of coping and kind of regulating our emotions when we encounter difficulty, the better mental well-being we have. Not only just mental well-being, also physical health. So for instance, if you have more self-compassion, you have better immune function, you sleep better, which means you've got better physical health as well. So at this point, it's really just phenomenal, the benefits of self-compassion. And it's easy. Doesn't take time, doesn't cost any money. Just means treating yourself with the same kindness and warmth you would show to a good friend.